At the family dinner, my parents sent me away and said, "This place isn't for losers." When I asked why, my mom said, "Your brother is bringing his girlfriend to meet the family. He doesn't want you there because your blue-collar job would embarrass him." I just said quietly, "I understand." 5 days later, they showed up at my door, furious after finding out the truth. My brother's girlfriend was... I never thought my own family would treat me like an intruder at our dinner table. But that night, as I said, a carefully wrapped gift on the counter, my mother's voice cut through the clatter of forks and plates like a blade. "This place isn't for losers." For a second, I thought she was joking. My father kept chewing, avoiding my eyes. My younger brother Daniel shifted uncomfortably, while his girlfriend Sophia squeezed his hand as if to remind him where his loyalty belonged. I froze, still, holding my coat, the words burning into my chest. They weren't just telling me to leave the table. They were erasing me from the family itself. The scarf I'd chosen for Mom, the engraved watch for Dad suddenly felt like cruel reminders of how little I belonged. I walked out quietly, realizing that sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from home. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic bread should have felt comforting. It was the scent of home of Sundays in my childhood, when laughter echoed through the walls and Dad hummed old songs while Mom set the table. But that night, everything about the room felt foreign, like I had stumbled into someone else's house by mistake. I stood in the doorway, clutching my coat and the small gift bag I'd brought when my mother's words sliced through me. "This place isn't for losers." At first, I thought I'd misheard. The dining room was full, candles flickering, plates clattering, Daniel smiling in his crisp shirt, Sophia's diamond earrings catching the light. The laughter that had filled the room seconds earlier froze midair. The only sound left was the clinking of cutlery as Dad set his fork down, deliberately slow, as if giving himself an excuse not to meet my eyes. "Mom," my voice cracked in the silence. "What did you just say?" Karen didn't blink. She folded her napkin into a perfect square. Her lips pursed. "Victoria, you heard me. Tonight is Daniel's night. He's bringing Sophia to meet us properly. We want everything to be polished." Her eyes flicked from my boots to the oil stain on my sleeve. "And you showing up like this, well, it just doesn't fit. Doesn't fit." The words rang louder than the clinking chandelier above us. "I showered after work," I muttered, my hand brushing my jacket as if I could erase the hours I'd spent under the hood of a truck. "I came straight here because I wanted to be on time." Daniel shifted in his seat. He wouldn't look at me. His jaw clenched as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't. Sophia rested her hand on his arm, squeezing gently, urging him to stay quiet. Dad cleared his throat. "Let's not make a scene," he said, his voice low, his eyes still glued to his plate. A scene. That's all I was to them. A threat to their perfect little picture. I set the gift bag down on the counter with more force than I intended. Inside was a silk scarf I'd picked out for Mom, her favorite shade of emerald green, and a watch I had engraved for Dad. "Thanks for teaching me to fix everything." I'd imagine the smile on his face. The small moment of recognition. Now the bag looked pathetic. Cheap, even against the marble countertop. "You really don't want me here." My voice was steady, but inside I was crumbling. Karen exhaled, as though I'd just asked the most inconvenient question in the world. "Victoria, this isn't personal. It's just Daniel deserves his moment. He's worked so hard. And Sophia's family, well, they're people of stature you wouldn't understand." Her words landed heavier than the scarf in the bag. "You wouldn't understand." My hands trembled as I slid my arms back into my coat. I wanted to scream, to throw the gifts at their perfect china plates. To tell Sophia that Daniel would be nothing without the countless nights I'd covered for him. The rent I'd secretly paid. The job I'd helped him land. But no words came. Only silence. I glanced at Daniel one last time, hoping for anything. An apology. A defense. A whisper of loyalty. But he sat frozen, his fork tight in his hand, eyes locked on the tablecloth. And that was my answer. I turned toward the door. The soft thud of my boots on the polished floor was the only sound as I left. No one followed me. No one called my name. The night air outside was colder than I expected, biting at my skin. I walked down the porch steps, with my coat as half-buttoned. Each step echoing the truth that had always been there but never spoken aloud. I wasn't family at this table. I never had been. That was the night I realized they hadn't just forgotten me. They had erased me. The gift bag felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it wasn't the weight of the scarf or the engraved watch inside, but the weight of what they represented. My attempt once again to belong. I had chosen them carefully. Emerald green silk, because Mom loved that color, and a classic silver watch for Dad, with words carved on the back that said, "Thanks for teaching me to fix everything." I had spent hours thinking about those words, trying to capture the gratitude I still carry, despite all the years of silence. Now both gifts sat abandoned, on the marble countertop, untouched, unwelcomed. I stared at them one last time before stepping outside, hoping someone, anyone, would call me back in. Maybe Dad would pick up the bag and say, "Wait, Vic." This must have taken some thought. Maybe Daniel would finally stand up to Mom just once and remind her that I was his sister, not some stranger crashing their party. But the door stayed shut, and the only sound was the faint murmur of voices continuing the dinner without me. I walked down the steps. The cold is biting harder than I expected. Each gust of wind pushed me further from the house, further from the family I had once bent myself in half to please. By the time I reached my truck, my eyes were stinging. I told myself it was the wind. It wasn't driving home. The wrapped gifts haunted me from the passenger seat. I couldn't bring myself to take them out. They looked too out of place in my small, cluttered kitchen. The scarf folded too neatly. The watch is too polished for someone like me. I set the bag on the table and left it there. As if moving, it would make the rejection feel more permanent. That night, my house was unbearably quiet. No hum of conversation. No sound of forks against plates. No laughter from Daniel about some inside joke Mom and Dad would always indulge. I cooked myself scrambled eggs and toast. The simplest meal I could manage, because anything it felt more like pretending. Pretending I was still part of a family that wanted me at their table. I sat alone, staring at the bag, at the green silk peeking through the tissue paper. My chest ached with the thought of Mom opening it, smiling faintly, maybe even wearing it once, just to appease me. But that moment would never come. My gifts would remain unopened. Silent proof that I had tried once again to bridge a gap that was never meant to be closed. I thought about the countless other times I had done the same. The bouquet of lilies I brought every Mother's Day, even when I knew she preferred the ones Daniel bought from the forest downtown. The afternoons I spent fixing Dad's lawnmower without being asked, waiting for him to notice. To say, "Good job, kid." He never did. The rent money I wired to Daniel when his apartment flooded. Money I could barely spare at the time. He thanked me once, casually, like I'd spotted him a few dollars for lunch. And then he never spoke of it again. The scarf and the watch weren't just gifts. They were symbols of years spent chasing acknowledgement, a seat at the table that was never meant for me. And now, seeing them sitting untouched, I realized how foolish it was to believe this time would be different. I leaned back in my chair. The silence pressing in around me. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and relentless, covering the streets like a blanket. I imagined the warm glow of my parents' dining room. Sophia's laughter rang out as Daniel charmed her with stories. Mom refilling wine glasses. Dad making his rare dry jokes. They were together. They were whole. And me, I had a scarf no one would wear and a watch no one would look at for the first time. The thought crossed my mind that maybe I didn't need to keep trying. Maybe I needed to stop pouring myself into a well that would never return water. I looked at the bag again, its crisp white edges glowing under the kitchen light, and whispered into the empty room. You'll never reach them. And I knew I wasn't just talking about the gifts. When I was little, I used to believe love was something you earned, like grades on a report card or trophies on a shelf. If I worked hard enough, smiled enough, behaved enough, maybe then my parents would look at me the way they looked at Daniel. But no matter how much I tried, their eyes never lit up for me the way they did for him. Daniel was the golden child from the moment he was born. I still remember the day they brought him home from the hospital. I was 6, clutching a crayon drawing I had made of our family. I had colored myself in bright yellow, thinking it would make me stand out. Mom barely glanced at it before swooping down to show me Daniel's tiny hands, whispering, "Isn't he perfect? Perfect." That was the word that stuck. Growing up, Daniel's every achievement was celebrated like a national holiday. When he scored a goal in soccer, Dad cheered so loudly, the neighbors came outside. When he won his middle school spelling bee, Mom baked a cake with his name and frosting, inviting the whole block to share. When I earned a place on the honor roll, the certificate ended up tucked into a drawer half covered by unopened mail. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need the spotlight. But the truth was, every time they clapped for him, I ached for even the smallest applause. By high school, the pattern had calcified. Daniel got a car for his 17th birthday. A shiny, used Honda. But still, it was his. I got a pat on the shoulder and a reminder to be responsible. When Daniel failed his in my first college class, Dad drove 3 hours to help him talk to the professor. When I struggled through my first year at trade school, paying tuition with tips from my part-time job, Mom told me, "Well, you chose that path." I tried not to resent him. Daniel never asked to be their favorite. Sometimes he even looked guilty when they praised him in front of me. But guilt never stopped him from soaking it all in. And when he grew older, he leaned into the role, comfortable in the glow I could never touch. The one memory that stings most happened when I was 21. Our old roof had started leaking, and Dad spent weeks complaining about the cost of repairs. I saved up quietly for my shifts at the shop, bought the materials myself, and climbed up there with a hammer and nails. It took me 3 weekends to patch it all. When the job was done, I expected at least a thank you instead. Mom laughed at the uneven shingles and said, "If only Daniel had been here, he would have done it properly." I swallowed the words. I wanted to scream. He didn't lift a finger. I did. But I said nothing. I always said nothing. That silence became my curse. Every time Daniel faltered, I picked him up in secret. I covered his rent once when the internship didn't pay. I drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to tow his car when it broke down. I helped him rehearse speeches for his first job interview. And every time he accepted my help, then let our parents believe he had done it all alone. Looking back now, I wonder if that's why Mom could call me a loser so easily at dinner. Maybe in her eyes, I had never been anything else. She had spent years convincing herself that Daniel was the achiever, the success story, the pride of the family and me. I was just the one holding the safety net. Invisible, under the spotlight, carrying the weight, but never seen. As I sat in my kitchen that night, the scarf and the watch staring like failed exams, memories pressed in from all sides. I saw myself at 12 holding up my art project while Mom praised Daniel's science fair ribbon. I saw myself at 16 working double shifts to afford my books while Dad bragged about Daniel's summer soccer camp. I saw myself at 21 hammering nails into that roof while they laughed about my crooked work. Every memory was a bruise that never healed. And now their words at dinner weren't just an insult. They were confirmation of something. I had always feared that no matter how much I gave, no matter how much I tried, I would never be enough. I leaned forward at my table, pressing my hands into my face, whispering to myself the truth that hurt more than anything. I was never meant to be seen. For years, I let their silence define me. If Mom said Daniel was the brilliant one, then maybe I was the background noise. If Dad never looked twice at my work, maybe it was worthless. But deep down, a voice kept whispering, "Prove them wrong." It started small. One late night at the shop where I worked, I was 22, grease under my nails, exhaustion pounding behind my eyes. When the radio in the corner played a finance podcast, I didn't understand half of what the host was saying. Compound interest index funds, dividends. But something about the words lodged in me. I was tired of being broke, tired of scrambling just to survive, tired of waiting for someone to see me. If no one was going to build me up, I would build myself the next. In the morning, I went to the library. I checked out a book called The Simple Path to Wealth. I devoured it in 2 days, then picked up 5 more. At first, it felt like reading in a foreign language, but slowly, numbers started making sense. Money wasn't just survival. It was power, independence, proof. At 23, I opened my first brokerage account with just $700. It might as well have been $7 million to me. I remember staring at the screen, my hand shaking as I hit buy on my first index fund. I skipped new boots that winter so I could add 300 more. I ate ramen 3 nights a week to scrape together every extra dollar. My coworkers teased me, called me cheap. I let them laugh. They didn't know I was planting seeds. By 25, I had started a routine wake-up at 5:00 a.m., read finance blogs before work, tracked dividends during my lunch break, and pick up side jobs on weekends, not for spending money, but for investing. Every oil change, every busted carburetor, every late night, I went straight into my future. When I bought my house at 28, it was a wreck. Peeling paint, cracked pipes, a furnace that hadn't worked in years. Mom shook her head when she saw it, muttering, "Why would you waste money on that dump?" Daniel laughed. Calling it a junkyard shack? They didn't come back to help. They didn't even ask how I managed. But I fixed every inch myself. Every dollar I saved on contractors went into my portfolio, and brick by brick, room by room, I made it mine. By 30, something remarkable had happened. My accounts passed the 6-figure mark. I kept quiet. I didn't tell Mom or Dad. I didn't tell Daniel. Not even Maya. My best friend knew the full amount. The secrecy wasn't shame. It was protection. I knew the moment the numbers came out, their eyes would shift. They wouldn't see me anymore. They'd only see the money. As of last year, my net worth crossed $3 million. I say that not to boast, but because it still feels unreal. Me, the loser, the distraction, the one who didn't belong, built a life my family couldn't imagine, and I did it without applause, without recognition, without a single pat on the back. Sometimes I wonder if that's why I never shared it. Because part of me wanted to prove that their approval was never required. That I could become something on my own. Quietly, without their help. And yet, there were nights I sat in my little kitchen, the scarf and the watch still waiting in their bag, and thought if they only knew, if they only saw me for who I really am, not who they think I am. But then I remembered Mom's words at the dinner table. This place isn't for losers. Let them think I'm a loser. Let them think I'm invisible. They've never met the woman behind the steel-toed boots, the one who turned every ounce of rejection into fire. And when the truth finally came out, because secrets like mine never stay buried, I knew everything would change. It was 5 days after that dinner, when I heard the crunch of tires on fresh snow outside my house. I was under the hood of an old pickup in my garage. Grease smeared across my hands when car doors slammed shut. At first, I thought it was a customer. But then I recognized the voices are too familiar, too sharp to make mistakes. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped into the cold. There they were. Mom. Dad. Daniel and Sophia standing in my driveway like ghosts dragged out of a memory. Victoria, Mom called her tone forced, cheerful, as if nothing had happened. She clutched a tin of cranberry muffins like it was a peace offering. We thought we'd drop by. Check in on you. I crossed my arms. Check in after telling me I wasn't welcome at dinner. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, her high heels sinking into the snow. Daniel's face was tight, his eyes burning. He stepped forward, voice already sharp. You should have told us. Vic. He blinked. Told you what Daniel's jaw flexed about everything. That you helped me get my first job at the shop. That you vouched for me when I almost got fired. That you... His voice cracked. You covered for me. I froze. My chest tightened. And how exactly did you find out? Sophia spoke up. Arms crossed over her chest. Evan told me. He said you practically trained him. That without you, he wouldn't have had a career. He also mentioned your investments. Her eyes narrowed. That you've been sitting on over $1 million and never said a word. The air turned brittle. Dad rubbed the back of his neck. We had no idea. Sweetheart. His voice was softer than I'd heard in years. I laughed bitterly. Of course you didn't. You never asked? Daniel's face returned. He jabbed a finger at me. Do you know how humiliated I felt? Evan made me look like a fool in front of Sophia and in front of her family. He kept saying how much he admired you. You of all people. Do you know what that does to me? I stared at him. Stunned. To you, you mean the fact that I worked my ass off in silence makes you feel small? Daniel's voice rose. You could have at least told us. Instead, you let everyone think you're some grease monkey scraping by. You made me look. He struggled for words like, I was nothing compared to you. My temper snapped. I didn't make you look like anything. Daniel, you chose to ride on the pedestal they gave you. You let them believe you were the golden boy while I held up the damn foundation. Mom stepped in, her voice trembling. Victoria, that's not fair. I only wanted the best for Daniel. I cut in. My voice echoed in the still air. It's always been about him. His games. His grades. His moments. And when it came to me, silence or worse. Mulcahy. Sophia shifted again, biting her lip. Dad looked at the ground. Snowflakes gathering on his coat. For once, no one had an easy answer. The muffins in Mom's hands trembled. We didn't realize. That's the problem. I shot back. You never realized, because you never looked. The silence that the following was thick. Painful. I could hear the faint hum of the garage light behind me. The crunch of ice as Daniel shifted his weight. Their perfect picture had cracked. And for the first time they were seeing me. Not as the family disappointment. Not as the loser they'd cast aside. But as someone they couldn't control. And yet, even as a cold bit through my jacket, I felt a strange calm. This was just the beginning. The storm had finally arrived. The cold air stung my cheeks, but the fire in my chest burned hotter. I looked at the four of them. Mom, clutching her muffins like they could erase years of silence. Dad pretending to be small in his own coat. Daniel glaring like I had stolen something from him. And Sophia shifting uneasily. Caught in the crossfire. You never cared, I said, my voice low but sharp. Not once. All those years I tried to belong. You never saw me. And now that you find out I have money, now you show up at my door. Mom's lips trembled. It's not about money. Victoria, I snapped. Don't you dare, stand here and lie to me. Because if Evan hadn't told you, you'd still think I'm nothing more than the grease under my nails. Dad finally lifted his eyes. That's not true. We were just trying to do what my laugh was bitter. Protect Daniel. Protect your perfect picture. I've been the scapegoat. My entire life, so he could shine brighter. Do you even remember when I fixed the roof by myself? When I paid his rent behind your backs? When I spent 3 weekends patching this family together while you pretended not to see me? Daniel stepped forward. His fists clenched. Stop acting like you're some kind of martyr. You helped because you wanted to. Nobody asked you to. My blood boiled. Nobody asked me. Daniel, you called me at 2 a.m. when your car broke down in the middle of nowhere. You begged me to keep it quiet when you almost got fired from the shop. You didn't just ask me. You relied on me. And then you let Mom and Dad believe you did it all alone. Sophia's voice wavered. Daniel. Is that true? Daniel's jaw tightened. She's exaggerating. I barked out a laugh. Exaggerating. Do you want me to pull out the receipts? The bank statements? The nights I dragged myself out of bed after 12-hour shifts? Just to save you. You think I enjoyed being invisible? You think I wanted to play the fool while they cheered for you? Mom's eyes filled with tears. We didn't mean to erase you. I cut her off. But you did. Over and over again. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every chance you had to say, we're proud of you. You kept it for him. My voice cracked. But I pressed on. And now, the second you learned that I built something without you, suddenly I'm worth your time. Suddenly you want to check in. The silence was unbearable. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Dad tried again. His voice quieter this time. Maybe this could be a chance. Evan said there's a business idea. Something with auto parts distribution. He thought, and there it was. The real reason. I stepped back, shaking my head. You came here with a pitch. Not an apology. You came here because you want something from me. You always do. Daniel's face twisted. You're letting pride get in the way. This could help all of us. This isn't pride, I said, my voice rising until it rang through the driveway. This is survival. This is me finally saying no. For once in my life. I'm not going to buy my way into your love. I'm not going to bleed myself dry, just so you can pretend I belong. Mom reached out as if to touch my arm. But I pulled away. If you want to rebuild something real with me, I said, my voice shaking with rage and sorrow, it won't start with a business deal. It won't start with you deciding I'm useful now that I have money. Daniel shouted, his voice breaking. So, you'd rather throw away your family than work with us? I stared straight into his eyes. Family doesn't throw you out of dinner and call you a loser. Family doesn't erase you for decades and then come crawling back when you have something they want. You don't get to rewrite history because you're embarrassed now. The air between us crackled alive with everything we had never said. My chest heaved. My hands trembling. For years I had swallowed my words. Buried my anger. Played the quiet loser they wanted me to be. But tonight, the dam had broken. And I wasn't going back. For a moment, no one spoke. My words hung in the frozen air, sharp as glass shards. Snowflakes drifted between us, silent witnesses to the wreckage of a family unraveling. Mom was the first to move. She stepped closer, her eyes glossy. "Victoria. Honey. We made mistakes. We were wrong to exclude you. But we're here now. Aren't we? We want to start over." I shook my head slowly. "No. You don't want to start over. You want to salvage your pride. You want my money. My experience. The proof that I'm not the loser you always thought I was. That's not love. That's desperation." Thou sighed, his shoulders slumping. "It's not like that. We just didn't know." My laugh cut through him, bitter and sharp. "You didn't want to know. Because if you knew, you'd have to admit you were wrong. You'd have to admit that the daughter you pushed aside, mocked, Ira said, built something stronger than all your expectations combined." Daniel finally spoke, his voice raw with anger. "You think you're better than us now, don't you? Just because you've got a little money saved up. You think that makes you superior?" I took a step toward him, my boots crunching in the snow. "No. Daniel, what makes me better is that I didn't need to tear you down to rise up. I didn't need applause to keep going. I didn't need to be the golden child. I built my life brick by brick. While you basked in the spotlight and called me a failure." Sophia touched his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. But Daniel pulled away, his face twisted with humiliation. Mom reached out again, her voice breaking. "Please, sweetheart, don't shut us out. We're still your family." I looked at her hand, hovering in the air between us. For years, I would have given anything to feel that touch, to hear even a fraction of those words. But now they rang hollow. "You want to know what family is?" My voice trembled, but it was steady with resolve. "Family doesn't cast you aside when it's inconvenient. The family doesn't call you a loser and locks the door. Family doesn't measure your worth in how good you make them look. Family is about love, loyalty, showing up when it's hard. And you failed every test." Dad finally looked me in the eye. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. "So what happens now?" The question lingered. What happens now? For years I had begged for a seat at their table, bent myself in half for scraps of their approval. Now, for the first time, I had the answer. I turned, walked to the front door, and opened it wide. The glow of my living room spilled out onto the snow, but none of it felt inviting. It felt like a boundary, a wall they could never cross again. "What happens now?" I said. My voice, steady, "is that you leave. You decide whether you can love me for who I am. Not for what I have, not for what I can give you. But you make that decision on the other side of this door." The silence was suffocating. Mom's mouth trembled like she wanted to speak, but didn't know how. Dad shifted his weight, staring at the ground. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly, fury simmering under his skin. Sophia looked like she wished she were anywhere else. I didn't feel the silence for them this time. For once, I let it speak. After a long heavy moment, Mom lowered her hand, clutched the muffins tighter, and stepped back. Dad followed, his head bowed. Daniel muttered something under his breath, too quiet to catch, before storming toward the car. Sophia trailed after him, her heels leaving sharp marks in the snow. I closed the door gently, not out of anger, but out of clarity. On the other side, there, muffled voices faded with the crunch of tires pulling away. Inside, my house was still the scarf and the watch still sitting untouched on the counter. But the silence felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful for the first time in my life. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't begging to belong. I had drawn the line, and I wasn't crossing it again. It has been almost a year since the night I closed that door. Since then, the seasons have turned, snow giving way to spring and spring, to the golden hush of autumn. My parents haven't visited again. Daniel stopped calling after one half-hearted attempt, where he asked if I might reconsider helping him with a new business venture. I told him no. He hung up without saying goodbye. Oddly enough, the silence that used to feel like punishment now feels like freedom. In those months, I learned something I never expected. When you stop begging for a place where you don't belong, space opens for people who truly want you. It started small. A girl from my old trade school messaged me online. She said she'd heard rumors about how I built my portfolio and wanted advice. He hesitated, then invited her to meet at the community garage. One conversation turned into 5. 5 turned into 10. Soon I was giving weekend workshops on financial literacy for women who worked with their hands. Women who were told their worth stopped at their paychecks. Standing in that grease-stained garage, chalk in hummed, explaining compound interest to a room full of witted young mechanics. I felt something I had never felt at my parents' table. Belonging. And then there was Mrs. Anderson, my elderly neighbor. She became my unexpected family. Every week she'd wave me over to fix something in her house, always with cookies or pie waiting. She told me stories of her late husband, of raising children who didn't always understand her home. She said one afternoon as we drank tea in her kitchen, "Isn't where you're born, it's where you're seeing." Her words stuck with me. Of course, Maya never left my side. She'd pull into my driveway with her beat-up Jeep blasting music, holding 2 coffees and a box of donuts. "You working again?" she'd tease, brushing sawdust off my sleeves. We'd sit on my porch as the sun went down, talking about everything and nothing. She never once asked me about numbers in my bank account. She only cared if I was happy. One evening, as we watched the apple trees I planted begin to blossom, Maya asked softly, "Do you ever think about going back to them?" I didn't need to ask who she meant. I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs. Not unless they see me without the $1 million. Without the success. Without the armor. Maya nodded. They probably won't. I know. I smiled faintly. And that's okay. Because I wasn't building for them anymore. I was building for myself. I walked through my yard that night, my boots crunching softly against the grass. The apple trees stood young but steady, roots digging deeper every day. They were proof that growth doesn't have to be loud to be strong. Proof that even after winters of silence and rejection, something beautiful can still take root. Inside my house, the scarf and the watch still sat in their gift bag, unopened. I thought about throwing them away more than once, but I never could. They weren't reminders of failure anymore. They were reminders of the girl who kept trying, who kept hoping, even when hope was the loneliest thing in the world. I touched the bag gently and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me." Later that night, standing in my quiet kitchen, I finally said the words I had carried for years, but never believed until now. I am not a loser.